Hello, Tar Heel Nation. We're back. Another episode of UNC Hoops Talk podcast. I guess you kind of say this is the end of the season. We don't really do seasonal podcasts here. We just kind of keep rolling. After this one, we will jump to kind of monthly podcasts. This is kind of putting the bow or tying the bow on the 21-22 season. That was obviously phenomenal. We ended, but kind of up and down as we look at the whole season, a very unique Tar Heel season. So we'll jump into that a little bit before we kind of start to talk about all the excitement building for next season, of course, because it doesn't end. We just move on to the next one. So we'll try to make that transition as smoothly as we can tonight. But first, Gil, everything good, going good in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, for sure.
So again, I don't want this to be too much of a hey, look what we did in the tournament. This is kind of a season wrap up as a whole. So again, I think I know the answer to this, but have we ever seen a season like this in North Carolina basketball before?
Man, yeah, this was unprecedented in many ways. Although, as Tar Heel fans, we've grown accustomed to, you know, tremendous amounts of success, really. And I was just reflecting and thinking about the course of the last year. Just a little over a year ago, we're now moving to the end of April, but of course, it was on April 1st of last year that Hall of Famer Roy Williams retires. A brief coaching search ensues, and Hubert Davis is appointed, and we didn't know what to expect. So, it's the first time we've gone through that type of experience in a long time, with a new coach and an unproven coach. And he instilled different, he still had the Carolina values, of course, but, he went about it a little bit differently, which took some adjusting from the Carolina fan base, a lot of which, a lot of folks are pretty traditional in terms of what they expect to see, and it was different style a little bit, and the results were shaky for a while, which just added to the consternation, I suppose, and some of the anxiety. And then it all played out in this really epic fashion. I mean, particularly enhanced by the retiring of legendary, Coach K, and the way that we were able to not only defeat them in Cameron in his final regular season home game, and then to end his career in the Final Four. I mean, those are once in a lifetime wins that all of us that are Tar Heel fans were blessed to be witness to this past year.
Yeah,
So unprecedented,
for
unprecedented.
sure, for sure. And so I guess yeah, we've never seen it before, and it's pretty easy to say we'll never see one like it again because of kind of as you ended there with Coach K's ending uh, or retiring him, both regular season and postseason. So yeah, we'll probably never see a season like this again. But it's I wasn't even really thinking about that we're still going through first of Hubert Davis because this is the first class now that he has signed that's going to be coming in. It's we say these are his players now, even though they were probably still recruited, most of them anyway, with Roy there as well, because usually you're starting to recruit out a couple years into the future. But these are now Hubert's signees. First full off season that Hubert's going to go through. Hopefully, we're back to kind of what we expect of normal, so that we have the off season pickup games with the NBA stuff, NBA players coming back, and guys getting to play those pickup games. But yeah, just stepping aside from even Hubert's first year, I feel like the season as it went along is something we've seen the last couple of years a little bit, kind of mediocre to what our expectations are and what we're used to. And then the postseason is also something that we're very used to because we're used to going to the Final Four and contending for national championship. Is just really bizarre to get kind of both of those all lumped into one season. And then, like we both just said, Hubert's first year and the transition of going from two bigs, traditional, offensive rebounding being a huge part of our identity, the fast break, all of what was Carolina basketball to now what is kind of Hubert Davis Carolina basketball in a little bit more, pick and roll stuff, spacing, drive and kick, threes, all this stuff. And like you said, and like Hubert has said too, still the core values of Carolina basketball, but just doing it in a different way. And Probably took the players as well as the fans. I was kind of surprised. I don't know. Maybe I'll go to you next on this, but I think I'm surprised that I didn't anyway hear more complaining about the style of play. I don't know. Am I forgetting it, or was I missing it? I know I was off Twitter a little bit more this year than I had in past years, but we kind of knew he wanted to shoot more and open stuff up, and I thought we would kind of hear, especially with the mediocre season that we kind of had, more kind of pushback against that. Like, why don't we go back to two bigs, or where's all the stuff that we've won all our trophies with from the past? Am I missing it? Am I forgetting it? Where do you stand on
Yeah,
that?
I think people were ready for it perhaps, and then, within it, I think that in general, Carolina basketball fans are pretty intelligent fan base, but some of the subtleties might go overlooked by some folks as they just appreciate the ball going in the basket, or, the result is either a win or a loss. And so I think that, yeah, sometimes it does get lost, is the process. And you know, we're well aware, but Carolina was getting, like you said, mired in a little bit of a funk, a little bit of a period of mediocrity, unfortunately, here the last couple seasons of the Roy Williams tenure. And so I think there was always going to be a process to change the culture back to what it needed to be to bring about winning basketball. And I think the process happened faster, which brings about, than faster than maybe expected, uh, at least from the fan base and maybe even from the coaches too. I don't know. But now it's going to bring different problems, new problems for this season ahead, which we'll get to and we'll talk about.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get into that, like you said. We won't go there. So yeah, Mark Dalton is joining us here live on YouTube. If you aren't, go to youtube.com/UNC Hoops Talk. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us on a live podcast. So you can comment right along as we're talking. But he says everyone knew that Roy's system was becoming outdated. Loved it for many years, but needed to change. So yeah, maybe it's just that obvious.
People were ready
Um,
for change.
yeah,
And then I
obvious
think
that basketball is
also
kind of going that way.
no one could really say, well, we need two bigs 'cause we didn't have two bigs. We only had a big, a traditional big. Manek
Right.
obviously was the perfect fit for what Hubert was trying to do in terms of the evolution of the game, and bring Carolina up to where the game is at. And so, you
Right,
know,
and it is obvious to see kind of basketball's going that way. I mean, and with how many big guys are coming back to college basketball just because the NBA doesn't really have a place for them. That it's so different, and it is trickling down into our sport. But obviously, there's still um, a very much a place for those guys in college basketball. With the season that Manic had, and you can go down, the Kentucky Shebue, the Illinois guy did go pro, but Kofi Coburn there, Hunter Dickinson's coming back to Michigan. All these big guys coming back. There's definitely a place for them in college basketball. But we're seeing more, and again, that gets into, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the whole NLI stuff, bringing guys back to college basketball, which I mean, is awesome. I think it's just a completely different way than where we kind of want to go tonight. But um, yeah, and obviously winning solves everything. So the way we ended the season, you weren't going to hear much of, oh, we can't have this new system of Hubert Davis, shooting threes and stuff, because yeah, I think this was an accelerated rebuilding year. We kind of expected some, we all said give him some time, let him get his guys. We got to change kind of the way we play a little bit, and now it was just got accelerated because of the success we had in the postseason. So
we had a talented core, and in your last podcast, a little self-gloating here. I predicted the Final Four run. I think it was only one game off the final record, perhaps even two. So the talent was there. And
yeah,
so, yes, even though I agree with you, it was kind of an accelerated rebuilding year. I mean, it wasn't like the cupboards were empty. So there
right,
was talent. It just had to be utilized differently. The guys had to buy in. I think it took them, the better part of the regular season until the back half of the ACC season to get that buy-in and finally start to play unselfish and really mesh and gel as a team. And that was really the key. And the chemistry developed. Of course, they developed the Iron Five, got plenty of time to develop it together, which worked this time around. But there was also that one thing that we were worried about, which was the depth, which I think came into play in that national championship game, or just in the run in general. Because I do think there was just the slightest little bit of fatigue that we saw, really almost for the first time all season, there in the second half when Carolina couldn't quite thwart Kansas's run. But yeah, I mean, we'll take that deep run. We'll take the success that we had against Duke and ending K's career. That was fantastic. And there's a lot to be excited and look forward to. But I think also expectations need to be slightly tempered around uh, just, it's going to be different. There's, I think this year's team really thrived on that nobody believes in us mentality. Constantly everybody predicting Duke or predicting, other teams, and it's going to be different with the bullseye on their back, as a favorite.
Yeah, and so we'll start to transition that way. I do think a lot of our season is going to be forgotten because of the run we had in the postseason. People when we look back on this year, it's going to be, oh yeah, that was the year we ended K. We went to the Final Four. We beat Duke in K's final home game. We beat Duke in the first time we've ever met in the tournament, let alone a Final Four. And so we're going to forget about some of those early struggles and figuring it out with those guys early on. There was some poor play. I can remember podcasts where we're talking about just unforced turnovers. We're just throwing it away. I can remember. You mentioned fatigue, but I can remember games where we just didn't shoot the ball well to end games because or at least we thought from the outside, kind of
Yeah,
observing, it was fatigue and stuff. A
I
lot of that
I
will be.
I think you're right, Dan. That ultimately, what will last is those amazing victories that are unforgettable, that are historical. Uh, but I think there's appreciation, at least now. There's appreciation for the fact that this run was so unexpected by most. The team obviously believed they could do it. Before the season, I had belief, but in the middle of the season, who still had faith? I mean, I think one of the biggest things you're mentioning, some of the nuts and bolts of the losses, but I just remember some of the poor effort in some of those displays. You know what I mean? The back-to-back games against Miami and Wake Forest, blowout losses on the road in the ACC. Just and Kentucky there in the Hall of Fame Classic or the CBS Sports Classic, whatever. The lack of effort was concerning, and even in the middle of the season, I remember in the podcast or even in our private chat, talking about it with Blake of like, man, I really give a lot as a fan, and I invest a lot of my time. I look to see when games are, and if the players aren't going to put in forth the effort, then I'm going to start to, find better ways to use my energy and time. You know what I mean? But again, it started to click late in the season when they're back against the wall, and basically they had to win virtually every game. They let one slip, and that was the only one they could let slip because literally they were barely about to get in the tournament. The way the ACC was undervalued this year, and thank goodness they got in at the position that they got into and led to just a memorable run. I mean, and just it is crazy as Carolina basketball fans the what we get to experience. I mean, that game against Baylor, like that's many programs would live to
That would have
have
been the
that
national championship.
exactly, to have that one type of game. And we got that, and then the game against UCLA. I mean, that was a high quality game.
Yeah.
Just this past week, I know that they put out the replay of the Duke Carolina Final Four, so I enjoyed watching that the other night. I'm not sure if that UCLA Carolina game is up, but I will definitely go back and watch that one too if given the opportunity. And that Baylor one, I mean, goodness gracious, those were some incredible games, and we got to experience it all in a few weeks span.
Yeah. I'll be interested, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, whatever it is, when we look back at this year, what people remember us like our seed. Will people remember that we were I mean, obviously when you remember the Duke or I mean the Baylor game that we beat the 1 seed, you're gonna say, okay, we were an 8 or 9. But just if you look at it as a whole, people are like, oh yeah, we must have been about a 2 or 3 that season, or what it actually gets remembered as. That'll
Man,
be
we were
interesting to me.
one rebound away, one, play or two of execution late in the game from winning the national championship as the 8 seed, which, if I'm not mistaken, the only other team to do that is Villanova.
Yep. Yep, I believe so because I think, Kentucky made it with the Harrison twins, and then that's when UConn beat them. I think they were an 8 seed that year, but then they ended up losing it like we did. So, alright, so as we tradition or transition into kinda looking ahead to this next year, John says we need a Gil leg update. How's the leg do? Are you ready for some pickup games here? Still got
I,
the
I
wrap on.
I just put some ice on it, yeah. But I'm walking and getting back closer to normal activity. I mean, I'm pretty normal with activity, but if you ask me to run, down the road, that would be a stretch at this point. But I'm on the road to recovery. Thanks, John, for the shout out. I'm healing, getting better, getting stronger. I'm doing a ton of physical therapy, like either going to the physical therapy clinic or doing it on my own because I'm just bound and determined to get back to health. I got
Be
that
re-
athletic mentality, so
be ready for next season.
I'll be ready for next season.
Take it easy in the off season. Be ready for the season.
Yeah, that's right.
So Mike says we got a new era. We're about to dominate the recruiting scene. Start to get those top 5 kids in every class. So yeah, coming in obviously, or not even obviously, but I don't think I mentioned in the last podcast kind of some of the movement for our roster. Again, if you listen to this podcast, you're probably paying enough attention to know what's happened. But of course, we lose Brady Manick, who does not have any eligibility left. The only starter that ends up leaving. Caleb waited until the last minute. Actually, I think he was probably past the deadline when he finally did announce, but he finally announced he's coming back. RJ put out his video. So we got the other 4 of the Iron Five coming back. We lose Anthony Harris to the transfer portal. I don't think he's announced where he's going yet, has he? I don't think I'm
Haven't heard.
wrong there. And then, am I forgetting somebody else that went into the portal from us? Is he the only one?
Dawson Garcia.
Well, yeah, okay. I get, I did. I knew there was somebody else, and it seems like an obvious one once you say it. But and then yeah, Garcia, he's committed to Minnesota, so he was at least truthful in that he wanted to stay closer to home. He stayed in Minnesota by his family, and so that brought us down to with Leaky staying his extra year, all our scholarships given up, and we're full. So we do at this point we have nobody or no open spots to add in a transfer porter to us. Even though if you listen to Baycott on Jeff Goodman's podcast with Robbie Hummel, apparently a ton of guys are sliding into his Instagram DMs asking about wanting to play at North Carolina, even some top tier guys. I would love to kind of hear that list of who's inquiring about North Carolina, but
Well, and
I don't think
could they possibly come and just not be awarded a scholarship? And perhaps there's enough NIL deals going on that could make that happen. I don't know. We're not going to get into the
yeah.
whole NIL discussion here. I think there's a lot of good things
I,
about it,
I
but
heard
there needs to be some
there's got to be yeah some
regulation.
limitations. And I heard that somewhere else, but like, do you want to be the person that okay, so you're making $100,000 in NIL, and you know whatever college costs now, especially out of state, you're giving away half that money or a quarter of that money even, uh, just to pay, and then like, what's the rotation going to be? So, or you know, I mean that we're pretty deep. Besides big guys now, we have Armando coming back, Will Shaver's coming up. We'll talk about these guys, but Jalen Washington's coming in off of an injury. So there's potentially minutes as a big guy coming in. But as far as a guard, like, who's taking away minutes from RJ, Caleb, and then we got Seth Tremble coming in as a point guard, and we got plenty of wings. I mean, a lot of guys that didn't play last year, but you assume they kind of make a jump or they're sticking around because they believe they're going to get some minutes or can get some minutes. So where do those minutes come? So, do you give up money to pay your way to come into such a loaded place? So, yeah. So I've mentioned a lot of these guys. So we have our roster kind of set as far as we know. There could be some kind of surprise. People, I don't think the entry. I think they have till May 1st to enter the portal. So technically, we have, what 3-4 days left. Well, less than 4, but 3 full days left that they could enter the portal. But I haven't heard any rumors about that. So kind of our roster is set. New guys coming in. We mentioned Will Shaver. He's been on the team. He redshirted this year. He came in the beginning of January for the second semester. Redshirted this year, so he got to practice with guys. He's a 3-star big man, but he has gotten a lot of practice time against Manic and Baycott and stuff to kind of get his feet wet. And then we also have Jalen Washington, as I mentioned, 5-star big guy coming in, but he did not play his senior year of high school because he's ACL injury. lots of talent, but we'll kind of see. And he's Will Shaver's more of a banger like Manic, or sorry, like Baycott. Jalen Washington would be more of, I don't want to say he's going to be like Manic out on the outside, but a little bit more inside out of a big guy. And then we have Tyler Nickel, um, 6'8" on inside Carolina. He's listed as a small forward. I could see him playing some power forward as well, and kind of that um, shooting power forward like Manic was, but did not play against a very high talented of competition in his high school. So we'll see how ready he is. And then we have Seth Tremble, um, JP Tokoto's little brother, coming in as a point guard with lots of talent, but again coming behind a lot of talent returning. So that's kind of what we got coming in with, of course, all the guys that you know didn't really play much this year. We still have Demarcus Dunn, we got Styles, we got Curran Walton. I'm probably missing
Justin
other guys. Yeah,
McCoy
Justin McCoy
and Puff Johnson.
and Puff John. Yeah, and which obviously is where most people think the big leap will be of filling Manic spot is with Puff Johnson. So um, yeah, I mean, we're not gonna get into future classes of recruiting and stuff. We'll leave that till later, and Blake is much more in depth on the recruiting trail than either of us. But you already mentioned it's gonna be different next year. Now we can't just expect, people are saying run it back. We can't just, it's not that simple. What are your way too early, since everybody puts out the way too early top 25 or whatever, what are your way too early expectations for next year?
Yeah, way too early, like you said. Yeah, it's hard not to, obviously we all want them to be as successful in the NCAA tournament as they were and more. We all want them to bring championship home. I think they're capable, but chemistry plays such a huge role in team sports. And you just mentioned a handful of new names that are going to be there. Other players that are going to be fighting. I mean, a player like Kerwin Walton, for example, that many probably speculated might enter the transfer portal. Uh, he appears to be staying. I'm grateful for that. I think he could end up being a key cog next year. We're losing the best 3-point shooter in the ACC in Brady Manick this past season, and we need to replace that. And I think Puff is a capable shooter, and he's going to bring some different dimensions, and he may well slot in as that fifth starter. We don't know that. Dontre Styles clearly showed some athleticism and some ability to rebound. I think Hubert obviously values defense, and that was probably more than anything what kept Kerwin Walton off the court this past season. So, in terms of expectations, it's tough to say who's going to rise to the occasion. How much of a leap does a player like Demarco Dunn make? Can he fill in as a backup point guard? But from what we saw out of the starting five and of those four returners, the evolution of RJ Davis down the stretch as a floor leader, as a quintessential North Carolina point guard type was probably as important to our success as anything else in the tournament. And I mean, this year, like any other year, you see how important guard play is in the tournament. And Caleb Love and RJ Davis, bounce between having great games between the two of them, and 3 years of them playing together. Hopefully that cohesion. Hopefully they can put it together. I mean, can't because it's tough to think of a game when they both played well together at the same time. You know what I mean? So if you can see them both playing great basketball, you know, boosting up some assist numbers, both of them a little bit, and shooting at a higher percentage, and both of them scoring and having a good game together. That's the recipe for success for this team. And Armando continued to do Armando things. I mean, he's a force in there. It's just a matter of, because he's such a force, staying out of foul trouble. So do we have enough depth? I think Shaver will be a nice replacement, to fill in some spot minutes. Hopefully McCoy makes a big leap and can fill in some, important minutes in big time games. There's a lot to be excited about for sure, but it's definitely going to be different. Going to be a different group of guys, although there's a lot of, familiar faces too.
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying it's or comparing us to UCLA, who made the run to the Final Four the previous year and then was preseason number 2, I think, coming in this year. And then people kind of forget how good they were, I think, in saying, "Oh, we can't have a UCLA to where we get ranked because of our run, and then we don't." Well, UCLA was a pretty good team this year. They were, top 10 pretty much all year. So,
It took Caleb Love going insane in the second half for Carolina to defeat them. Like, let's not forget that they were a really good team.
right.
And I think that is a logical recency bias comparison for sure.
Now, I think it was Jones and Adam talking about it. I do think no, I think it was maybe the CBS podcast I was listening to. They were talking about Carolina. I do think we were better this year, especially late in the year, than UCLA was during the year throughout that. They more, they barely got. We talk about we almost didn't get in the tournament. They were in the first four, so they were barely in the tournament and went on a run. We were a little bit better towards the end of the year, and then went obviously on a crazy run like they did. So I think our year was a little bit better than theirs. Um, but I do think, like you said, they were really good. If we have a top 10 year, if we're top 10 all year long, and then a team that gets really hot knocks us out in the lead eight, like you see, well, I guess there was a Sweet 16 that we knocked out UCLA, right? But something like that. If we're a really top 10 team all year, and then we get in, we get like, obviously, that's gonna for a lot of North Carolina fans, that's gonna be a bust of a year because we didn't go back to the Final Four or whatever, but it's not easy going to the Final Four. So I do kinda say we need to halter
It's
our
a one and
expectations
done
a little
tournament.
bit, right?
Yeah, it's a one and done tournament. And
We've had some really good North Carolina teams that didn't win the championship. So I do say we need to temper our expectations a little bit. I think that's kind of what you were getting at as well. It's great to be back into the, hey, we're a top five team. Where we're supposed to be and stuff. But I kind of said this right after the season too. Like, we can't now just expect Hubert to do this every year to go to the national championship or to the Final Four and stuff.
there's
It's
gonna be a game or a couple games next season when we're like, "What are these guys doing?" Like, "Where's
yeah,
the effort?" And sometimes I think as fans, we forget that they are student athletes and that, Armando Bacot is a student in the business school, so
yeah.
they have and they're humans, so they have things going on in their lives, and so that all does affect their ability to play, and sometimes that meshes together perfectly, and other times it can detract from their athletic, you know,
And it
potential.
it it was Adam Lucas who kinda said, like, when we get into these early exhibition games or non-conference games, it's not gonna be the same. Like, these guys just played, in the national championship game, they played Duke in the Final Four, they played in Coach K's final home game, like, they're coming off some pretty big time games. How do you get the same,
Yeah.
excitement to play
Yep.
Appalachian State in a non-conference game or, anything like that? So, yeah, we're gonna have games like that, and
And the
the
players are
fans
gonna
will
have to
probably react the same way that we did this year and be all
for
over
sure.
them.
And the players are gonna have to deal with different things. I mentioned earlier about expectations. And how this team thrived on
Right.
being a no one believes in us, but now it's gonna be different. They're gonna be favored. They're gonna have expectations to reach the Final Four. And how do they handle that pressure? And, there's also the aspect of, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but they're just gonna be dealing with different things than they did this past year. Oh, I know what I was gonna say now. Sorry. They're right now they're on a barnstorming tour, and there's gonna be those that do have NIL things going on. They got a little bit more of that to manage because they
Right.
are trying to, manage that, and so there's just different things that they have to deal with that could play a factor in how successful they are on the court.
Yep. I think that's gonna have to be one of our off-season podcasts is just kinda talking about NIL, and all that it can bring to the table because, you talked about earlier, chemistry is so big. Like, is there problems in the locker room because, hey, this person's getting more NIL than I am, or all this stuff. And Baycott talked about it too. Like, during the season, he didn't really do any deals where appearances were necessary. It was, he did some tweets and he did, kind of commercial or whatever, but he nothing where he had to go appear, and kind of give up his time like that.
Yeah.
So can we get the guys to do that again, or do they see that money and start to give up more of their time to do that stuff than other stuff we'd rather have them doing. So
It's definitely gonna be something that evolves over the
it's
course of the next few years, how NIL shakes out. We're still very much in
yeah,
the early stages
it's
and
it's the
how it's
Wild
gonna be
West right now.
utilized. Yeah. But it's a legitimate point, it's a legitimate thing to think about, and I mean, that makes me personally grateful that you have someone like Hubert Davis who had a 9 believe it was 9-season NBA career, that was in a locker room with professional athletes and knows how to kind of bring some of that management that he witnessed from some of the coaches that he was with, to the college level, which is kind of mirroring what it probably was
Yeah,
like to be in the pros, like
yeah,
10 years ago or whatever with the way this is going.
yeah. So I wanted to quickly go through some of the guys watching and commenting with us, kind of giving their expectations for next year. Troy Whitfield, and I put some of these up earlier, but is really high on Will Shaver. I think he'll be an excellent backup for Baycott. I am kind of glad that he's not going to be thrust into being the main guy or anything like that. Especially, again, we don't know how Jalen Washington's going to be coming off his injury, but he's going to be a big bruiser. I think he can give us some minutes in relief. I'm just glad that he's not going to have to be the big guy next year. Um, so Mike uh, says that Leaky is going to add 20 pounds and play the four for us and be the top five defensive player. The trouble, I think, with him going to the four would be when the other player's best player is a perimeter player. If we want Leaky to guard him, then who slides down to guard the four? And I think a lot of people's expectations now would be kind of the similar to Leaky here, but saying it about Puff, where Puff is going to put on weight and be our shooting four man from there. So, that's obviously stuff you can talk about it, but until it's done, you can't really predict that stuff. So Troy here says or asks, do we think that this team would have been better with, and he says Brooks, but he corrected himself and said with Brady Manick back instead of Dawson. Um, and I mean, I don't think there was ever an expectation really that Dawson was coming back.
I'm not sure what he means. That what maybe he was thinking about this last year's team and talking about Garrison. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure what you meant, Troy.
Yeah, maybe we can get a qualification there. So John says, I think it's Puff that puts on more muscle and is a Luke 2.0. So that's I think referencing to Leaky playing the four. Um, and then Troy also says, I think we don't have a true, and he corrected himself. He's having trouble with autocorrect here, but point guard since Joel Berry.
Good job deciphering that.
Well, he
Yeah.
corrected it in the next one here.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, different players, we love to compare different players from different eras, the Ty Lawson and Ray Felton debate and that kind of thing. And I do see some similarities in RJ and um, Joel Berry and just the way that they're tough, younger, I mean, smaller, diminutive point guards, but find a way to get in. So I think we're going to see an even better RJ Davis next year. We saw a lot of potential at the end of his freshman season. That's when he really started to kind of figure things out. And then he kind of took it up another level at the end of his sophomore season. So I think we're going to see even more the ability to finish with you know better percentage near the basket, to avoid getting in too deep. He maintained the ability to maintain his dribble sometimes versus like getting stuck in amongst the trees. You know what I mean, and turning it over. So I think we're going to see. I'm pleased with the point guard situation, and then you got hopefully Seth Trimble that can come in and provide minutes too. One thing that I'm going to be really, really curious to see for next season is how Hubert Davis manages all this. Because last year, this past season, we mostly just saw the Iron Five
Right.
with a little bit of sprinkled in Dontrez Styles and a little bit of sprinkled in Puff Johnson there down the stretch, and same with Justin McCoy, and that was kind of it. But now we have depth. I mean, look at all these players that we're mentioning. We have players that are going to continue to develop in the Carolina system, get those offseason games, like you said, with the alum. And, I think and plus the freshman incoming. How does he manage that? That can affect that chemistry we were talking about. So that's going to be something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on
Yeah.
throughout next season.
Well, and you say we have depth now, but we said that last off season too. We said we got all this depth coming in. We mentioned Baycott and Manic and Garcia to start the season down low. We mentioned, Styles and Dunn and McCoy and Walton and all these guys. Like we had all these guys, and we said we got all this depth, but then, like you said, we didn't use it, or it wasn't ready, or whatever the case you want to
Well,
say
and 2
happened.
players left. I mean, it's like having 2 players
Right, and then
injured.
we
We had
missed Anthony Harris, yeah, and so obviously he became ineligible. So yeah, we thought we had depth, and then we really didn't. So it will, like I said, that is kind of the biggest question mark is with this is the first off season of Hubert and his first class coming in, his now kind of going into it, hopefully his first kind of regular season, where he had the whole off season to prepare and stuff. Will we see more guys? And I think we kind of have to. I think he realizes too that he can't just you can't go through the whole season playing five guys, even six guys is pretty tough.
it's too
And
mentally grueling as well as physically, you know what I mean?
yeah, and as John says here, no major injuries. Most of the season. I don't know that guys really missed. They couldn't really miss any time because of injuries. I know. Baycott had that stretch where we thought something was wrong with his thumb or whatever, but he didn't miss any time. He didn't miss any games. He kept playing through it. So no major injuries this year. But yeah, we're definitely going to have to get the chemistry and just kind of get a flow to using the bench and using those guys. Um, during the season, again, going back to stuff we probably won't remember, but I know I was anyway afraid of guys portaling out because they weren't getting playing time. Obviously, again, winning solves a lot of problems. We go on this fantastic ride, and we did have moments from Styles and from McCoy and some of those guys, which to me kind of makes it more surprising that Walton didn't transfer because he didn't really ever have that moment. But obviously, he sees a place in there. But we win, and we go on this ride, and now everybody's back. We're bringing in new guys, and yeah, now it'll be interesting to kind of see what we do with that uh, going into next season and throughout next season. I think that's kind of an obvious of something we're going to have to see different from this year.
You mentioned it earlier about the interview with Baycott and players, high level players apparently seeking out the potential of playing at Carolina. So it's just really great to see that Carolina is a destination that these players want to be at, and that's reflected in the fact that we had very minimal, transfers here in the offseason. The two that transferred were the two that were ineligible, and it
Right.
made sense. You know what I mean? So we wish them the best, and I think we're grateful to have who we have. There might be some people out there that kind of wish we had a scholarship available to see what else we could get through the portal, but it's kind of old school. It's kind of going back to the Dean Smith era, and building the team. You're going to have seniors and juniors in our starting lineup. You know what I mean? And freshmen filling in spot minutes and that kind of thing, which is virtually what we saw last year, except that the guards were sophomores.
Well, and
So
and those are the type of teams that do win in March. We've talked about it. I think you said it earlier in this podcast. You kind of go as your guards go, but a lot of times too, it's been the upperclassmen led teams. Even Kansas this year, Villanova this year getting to the Final Four. Um, and we were kind of on that edge of we had guys that had played a lot of minutes. Brady Manick was obviously older, but now it's like the whole core has taken that step. We got fifth year Leaky Black, and now we got junior backcourt. Um, you know, uh, Baycott's been there 3 years already now. So um, Troy did throw out one other kind of dream scenario that we had kind of touched on earlier. But if Baycott pays for his senior year with all of his NIL money to free up a scholarship, and Gigi reclassifies and plays the point guard for us, I do think you're kind of dreaming there, Troy. I don't see him. I don't see him reclassifying, and I don't see Baycott paying his way to free up the scholarship. As again, as much as maybe that would be a dream scenario, I don't think that's going to happen. But um, yeah, I mean, I know we've kind of jumped around, we've kind of gotten everywhere, but I think we covered a lot of stuff as we jump into. Hopefully that kind of wraps up this season for us. I'm sure we'll reference it and we'll come back to it, but as we move into the off season and obviously start to look at a top 5 team. I think that's almost guaranteed that we'll be top 5 preseason next year. And quite a few polls will be, top 3. In a few polls, I'm guessing that will be top 1. And something unless something really drastic happens with other teams, because I don't think it's going to happen to our team. But um, the expectations will be there. It'll be a fun season. Hopefully, it won't be quite as dramatic as the season was this year. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, we are kind of, I don't know that we've necessarily been weekly since the championship game, but we will move to once a month podcasts. They'll hopefully keep us having plenty to talk to when we do podcast, and we'll get a little bit longer ones when we are here, but just not as often. So make sure wherever you're listening, subscribe so that it comes directly into your feed and you don't miss it. If you want to join us live here and comment as we're talking, go to youtube.com/UNC Hoops Talk and hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so that you'll get a little notification that we're going live, because it's pretty random, as we say every time now. And yeah, we're just glad to have you guys listening. As I say, just uniting Tar Heel Nation, and looking forward to hopefully kind of a quiet off season. Hopefully, we don't have too much noise, because kind of once we get into the draft and stuff, if we hear anything, it's usually people getting into trouble or stuff. So hopefully it's a quiet off season, um, and guys are getting in the gym and pumped and excited and ready for next season. But like I said, I think we've kind of covered everything. Gil, do you got anything as we go out here tonight?
I think that's like the fourth different name you've called me.
Probably true.
No, I think we covered it, everything that I was thinking about. Yeah, I mean, things are about to slow down. This is that time of year, which all of us are super excited at this point because we've got the announcements of everybody that can come back is coming back, so we're super excited. But now we got to wait 6 months, and it's going to be just kind of quiet, and we kind of just got to let the guys do their thing. And like you said, hopefully there's no incidents that cause us to go the wrong direction. But how many days left until next season?
I have no idea. I've not looked. I know somebody had just tweeted or messaged me on Twitter maybe and asking when the schedule comes out. I guess we can mention that we do know next year we will be playing Michigan in the Phil Knight Invitational out in Oregon, and then we have Ohio State in the CBS Sports Classic. Um, so yeah, we
Yeah,
got those games. I'm sure there's more non-conference games that have been announced, but I do not know them. I do not know when they start. Late night for with well, I was gonna say late night with Roy, but what do we call it? Live with
live
HG
action.
or something like that. Yeah, that's usually around mid-October, so that's what we're looking at. We'll start again, like we said, we'll still podcast through the off season. We'll start ramping it up, August, September, and into October. So stay tuned, and that's we're out of here. We've gone long enough here, Gil. Uh, until next time, go Heels.